it's time for our next team to do LCS Armchair GM with, and as voted by Twitch chat, the team we're going to cover next is FlyQuest. So, let's see. Right off the bat, Dallas Apartment in chat is asking if I'm going to build off the rumor, but I'm not actually sure what rumor you're referring to. So, if there is a certain FlyQuest rumor that would potentially influence what I'm going to talk about with them, let me know. So FlyQuest, what do they have for current assets? And to define this, okay, TSM rumors, that's completely different. As voted by one guy in Twitch chat with a lot of channel points. So, you know, that's how these things work. It's a weighted democracy. You got to watch a lot and build up a lot of channel points if you want to take over it. Current assets means players that are under contract going into next season. So if you're a pending free agent like Triple, you are not considered a current asset because FlyQuest does not get to determine whether they release you from a contract or sell you or retain you or whatever it's going to be. FlyQuest have a lot of current assets in terms of like the length of their list of names. All these folks. Right. So, before we start getting too deep into that, I just have to remind myself, hey, and the official FlyQuest Twitch account is in, saying have a great stream. Well, thank you very much, FlyQuest. I hope this is useful to your management team. Well, we're not doing pivot tables in this. This is far too basic. Goals for FlyQuest. So like generally the goals, and I keep this fairly simple, and this is competitive, right? I'm not talking about how you build your fan base or stuff like that. You're on a spectrum, and it's basically a one-dimensional spectrum that they're not mutually exclusive, but are you aiming more towards building up your kind of your core of players for the future so that in a future year you'll be able to compete and you've got a sustainable kind of development project going on, or are you trying to win right now? So, and I mean, this is basically a common thing in sports and how you approach these things, right? So the question really is FlyQuest in win now mode or win later mode? I think they came into this year leaning towards win later with what they did on acquiring, Palafox and Diamond, bringing in Licorice to be the veteran anchor. But it wasn't pure, it wasn't Golden Guardians level, lots of kind of unproven players, right? So, I think they're now going to be leaning. I think laying the groundwork here, a big question is, how successful was their kind of development year? And do they need to, are they further ahead in their development project than they were at the start of the year? I think they are. When you look at what the main pieces that make me feel they're further along now are, Palafox did, I think, get a little better over the course of the year. And the other really big one, exciting to me, is NXI. I think he developed really well. And then you've got Philip, who came in late in the year as kind of okay, this is a rookie piece to move forward with. So I think they're a little further along. And then the follow-up question of that is, are they further along enough that they think they can flip the switch into a win now year? And I'm less sure on that point. I think they still have another year of incremental progress. And so I don't want to see them throw away the progress they made this year in order to try to say, this is the time, take out the mortgage and win this year. So I think they want to stay the course. So I think they want to have a good year still, but I think they're going to aim to try to win in 2023. All right. So sub goal. Sometimes the whole goals and sub goals structure doesn't work out as clearly. When I did this for CLG, I said the number one goal is they want a long-term foundation, so they're very much on the development, start the development project. And then I had sub goals of hey, you got to get in mentor players, you have to win enough now, you got to start your youth movement. I mean, I think it's kind of the same here. It's just you're kind of in the middle, right? So I think, yeah, making playoffs is a good one. Thanks for the recommendation, B-Jack. Let's say make top 6, right? Because playoffs in summer is 8 teams. I think that's a pretty minimal goal. I think even if you're full development mode, you still want to do that. Well, let's say top 5. I think that's, half and half. Except that 5th, 6th is, if you lose at the same level, there is no real divider, so we'll say 6. End the year with stronger talent pipeline than you started. Now I'm getting a little more specific on these goals and not so generic, so hopefully that's something that you say. Empire wants to know, what if FlyQuest has money now to sign or buy out players? Implication being compared to what they had last year. Yeah, I mean, the amount of money you have improves the odds of being able to achieve what you want and maybe increases your ceiling on what you can achieve with that, but I don't think it changes what your overall goals are. It's just one of the resources. I mean, it's one of your current assets, and that's something I'm kind of factoring in a soft way to what your plans are and what your assets are. I'm not saying I think their budget is this size, right? So now we look at our assets. And I think right away I can identify one of the kind of keystone decisions is, who is our LCS jungler? We saw both Jose Dioto, obviously, as the kind of default starter. And then NXI came in a bit towards the end of summer. And then Jose Dioto came back in right at the end, right? I think you have a choice to make about what are you going to do between these two guys. And the direction you go with that could, lead to some other dominoes falling, because Jose is an import and NXI is not. It's kind of as simple as that. And I think also Jose, I think I'd say based on what we saw by the end of the year, his performance levels are a little higher right now than NXI. So if you're indexing a little bit more into winning this year, maybe you lean more towards Jose. If you're leaning a little bit more into winning in 2023 and onwards, maybe you say we're going to keep investing in NXI. And this doesn't mean that there are no jungle options where it's not one of those two. But I think it's pretty safe to say you're going to work with the assets you have. 1 second here. All right. I need a quick pause here for just a moment. But don't go anywhere. 1 second. Be right back. All right, we're back. Let's start with that. So yes, NXI, Jose Dioto, that's one of the keystone decisions you have to make. Now, what else? And how do you decide that? Okay. Will NXI be better in 23 than he... Like, basically, the question is, if you import NXI... if you promote NXI for 2022, how does that compare to what you expect if he spent another year in academy and then you promoted him 2023? Because also, like, playing out a whole year is one that you expect to have a lot of growth during that year. So just the level they're playing at right now isn't what you expect their level to be in August next year. So I think it really is decided on, if you promote NXI full-time for next year, would he be good enough to meet your goals, which I think are making top 6 next year. And you know what? I think I have a pretty clear opinion on this. My pretty clear opinion is, I do think they should be aiming to win in 2023, not 2022. I think long-term sustainability is super important, and I know that you need to show your parent company that you're succeeding, and selling them on 3-year timelines is tough. But these are my biases, and this is my Armchair GM. and I'm going to do everything I can to sell them on like, hey, we're probably not going to go to Worlds next year, but we're going to be in such a good position after that if we make these choices. So, and you know, if you have difficulties convincing your ownership group of that, then you have to adapt. But I'm going to be an idealist and say that that's going to work out. So given that our goal is to win in 2023, that we want to make top 6 this coming year and then end the year with a stronger talent pipeline, I think you promote NXI. You say thank you, Jose Dioto. You take the hit in terms of your brand, which is going to hurt a little bit, but and then you fill in behind NXI with deepening your talent pipeline, right? So that's what I'm going to start with. Even though it'll hurt. It'll be very sad. Palafox. Keep. And bring in another, like, use your academy mid lane spot to contest with him. So, like, to be clear, my goal, since I want to win in 2023, is I want to do what I can in 2022, that by the end of it, I have 3 domestic players who imports would be excited to play with and who are strong enough to get me to Worlds. And then I add the imports on top of that if I don't already have them. So Palafox could either be a player that I think by the end of 2022 is strong enough to get me to Worlds, or that I can then upgrade with an import if I'm happy with my domestic players in 3 of the other positions, right? So I think you keep him whether he ends up being part of, you know, your domestic core or a replacement option. Now Tomo and Johnson. This is tough. What are we going to do in the bot lane? Are either of those players good enough to get me to Worlds in 2023? You know, I mean, I don't feel bad about either of those players, but I don't feel super hyped about them either. So, like, the question is, are they good enough to meet my goals for 2022, and then I would upgrade on them for 2023? Or do I need to try right now and bring in somebody else that would give me a better chance of that? Like, I think it helps a little bit if I contextualize who the big assets are that I think they have, right? I think NXI is a long-term piece for them. I think Palafox is, you know, give him a shot to be that piece you need for 2023. And to be clear here, I'm still just talking about what FlyQuest currently have and not talking about outside the org what they're going to look at yet, because that's a later step. Kumo, I don't think is going to get you. I don't think he's a top 6 level top laner. I don't think he's somebody who you're going to, like, you can make top 6 with him, but I don't think he advances you on your talent pipeline. So I think I'm probably going to move on from Kumo. And I think I've had a whole year with him between, like, yes, he had that period in summer that made them, that, you know, said, hey, there's enough here that we were comfortable, that we're allowing Licorice, you know, we're going to sell Licorice and promote Kumo. But I don't think he finished out the year strong enough to be, for me personally, to be confident that he's what we need for the long term. And at support, Diamond, like, I don't know, especially given that when we do look at free agents, I think there are a lot of options that could help us with that top 6 goal a little bit better. Like, I think FlyQuest would be very interested in Afirmu. Right? And not just because of the potential Johnson Afirmu reuniting. But I do think Afirmu is definitely a target for them. Because Afirmu is a player that I would feel good enough that I could, if the rest of my roster is strong enough, I think I could get to Worlds with Afirmu. And his value for your talent pipeline as a mentor and a veteran is really high. It's like he's one of the top of my list players from what I'm interested in. And so if I'm going to do something like pursue Afirmu, I would rather have Afirmu at this point than to retain Diamond. Why would Afirmu want to go to FlyQuest? I mean, you have to sell them on the vision. This is a big challenge for an org, and I talked about it in the EG stream. Players want to play with other good players, and they want to be in a team where they think they can win. And you have to convince them of that, right? So what other players are you going to have in the lineup that would make Afirmu excited to join you? This is the challenge of the GM, and it's part of what they have to factor in, right? And like, who's going to be competing with FlyQuest or other teams on Afirmu? Dig will probably say, hey, Afirmu, stick with us. That's a point of competition. I think FlyQuest can make a stronger argument than Dignitas for next year. For why he should join them. I mean, maybe CLG will be interested. What other teams would be looking for support potentially? Like 100 Thieves, I don't think they'd be interested in Afirmu. They don't have a need there. Cloud9 don't have a need there. So you got CLG, Dignitas. I don't think EG would feel the need to bring in Afirmu as an Ignore replacement unless a lot of other pieces fall in different ways. Golden Guardians, maybe? Actually, they could be somebody who I could see being interested in Afirmu. If they're kind of flipping the switch into trying to win next year, which I think, I mean, we'll do an Armchair GM session on Golden Guardians at a different time. Immortals, I mean, maybe. But like the top teams, right? TSM aren't going to be interested in Afirmu. Team Liquid, I mean, unless something crazy happens and Core JJ isn't with them next year, I don't see why they'd be interested in Afirmu. So like, I think the options that Afirmu is going to have in front of him, I think FlyQuest will be one of the stronger options. So I think it's very, potentially realistic pursuit for them. Yeah, I don't think Dig can make a better case than FlyQuest for next year. I mean, maybe they can, but they aren't in a stronger position to start with, other than having the existing relationship. So like, let's just say as a scenario that Afirmu is a potential for them to pick up. By the way, ton of new channel followers today, so thank you very much to all of them. And I know that there's been a little bit of bits giving in the polls. So thank you to all the support thank you for all of the support on all of those. We're still looking at bot lane and top lane. So here's a scenario where if we're thinking we are going to use NXI and Palafox as kind of a carryover core, and that we're going to try to bring in Afirmu, or if we can't get him, maybe we bring in a Smoothie, or we look at the really rich import market on supports. Like, look at all these names, and maybe we can spend big enough to get one of them. Maybe not, but then what are we left with? So depending on whether or not we've imported at support, right? Maybe this is a big choice we have. I don't think it's huge, but so we might be left with 2 import slots for top lane and bot lane, or we might only have 1. So a huge, how much budget do we have is actually going to be huge for this team. for buyouts specifically. Because, like, this is a team that could be really interested in Isles or Ayla. Because those are players, both of them, that I think could definitely help you get into top 6 next year and be good enough in 2023 to bring you to Worlds, depending what you've done in the other spots. And they are not imports. But they're going to cost you a lot of money, I think. Poom might be an option, sure. We can put that on the list. I think he's going to be moderately expensive, but not super expensive. Not as expensive as Isles or Ayla, probably. So, like, if we just went wild on buyouts, then yeah, then King and Luger become bot lane options. Both these are buyouts. Both of them are going to be expensive. Luger's an import. Okay. Luger's a lot younger than King, less experienced, but he's an import. So I think, like, the value on Luger and King is fairly similar to me. Hey, Sly Penguin. And I think this spring, when Zeyzal was playing, I know a lot of people in chat are bringing up Zeyzal. I think, Zeyzal was looking pretty good to me in spring, but then now, everything fell apart with Solifida, of course, and haven't seen him play since then. And I don't know if he's really going to be interested in joining a project like this one, but maybe he would. I don't know if he'd be a better option than an Aphromoo who's been playing the whole year and has a proven track record as like a mentor kind of a player. I don't think he'd be a stronger performer than Isles or Ayla, but obviously free agent, not a big buyout. So a question from A Woods, what am I qualifying as expensive? When I put $3 signs, maybe it's not $1 million, but it might be close. But I might be getting way too generous on this. So maybe it's like 600,000 or something. I don't know. I just think it's expensive, like enough that you're going to be having to make hard choices on the rest of your budget if you go after this player, and that I don't think you're going to have the budget for 3 of these players. Like, you're not going to buy out a $3 sign top laner, bot laner, and support. That's just not going to be realistic. That is my take, but I could be wrong. And this is where I have to make a lot of assumptions. But let's say they did buy Luger. Let's say this is an option. And then they have an import slot for a top laner. Let's say this is a scenario. Broken Blade or Doran are like free agents I've identified in the top lane. Jenkins. Jenkins is a tough one for me. Would a team like FlyQuest be interested in Jenkins? Jenkins is a player who could maybe help you get into playoffs next year, like help you get a top 6 next year, but would he help you get to Worlds in 2023? I don't personally think so. I think, what he was able to do in LCS with TL this year, hey, good for him. But I didn't personally see enough that I'm like, yeah, this guy needs to have a full year in LCS, and I think I can get to Worlds with him. So the only scenario where I can see FlyQuest wanting to pick up a player like Jenkins is if they think we just need to buy a year. We need to buy a year of decent competitive success in order to allow ourselves to import or like upgrade with another free agent the year after. So like, let's just, for the sake of the exercise, let's look at top laners who might be free agents the next year, someday. Tien. Fake Odd. Is Fake Odd a top laner is going to get you to Worlds? I think a roster that has the quality to get to Worlds could have Fake Odd on it, but I don't think he would be one of the driving pieces of it. Impact, we talked about this on the EG stream, but the expectation is he'll be going to military after 2022, so I don't think he's actually a target. Maybe someone like Tony Top would become available as a replacement, like you buy a year with Jenkins and then you bring in Tony Top. I mean, maybe Philip will be ready by then, actually. This is something I'm not talking about. So, yeah, interesting. I mean, something I'm completely committed to is Philip is going to be in Academy next year. Give him a whole year and see if he can grow into a starter piece for 2023, for sure. I saw some pretty positive signs. I'm excited about him as a prospect. Kind of low-key excited, right? Like, I'm not like, you know, this guy's got potential bursting out of his ears. Like, I think he looks like he could turn into a really strong player, but it's far too early for me to know. But that's to me a lock for your Academy team. And so maybe if that's the case, then maybe Jenkins is somebody that you get a year out of and think this is going to help us. I think I would be a little happier with Jenkins than I am with Kumo personally, but it's not a big gap between them. And he does have a year, didn't he? I think. Let me double check. No, he's a pending free agent. I was wrong. So, let's just put that in here and then we can edit it as needed. I know Tenacity is being mentioned. He would cost a lot to buy out. But if you could get him, if you do have infinite money and you want to buy out a top laner, a bot laner, and a support to put around NXI and Palafox, then yeah, Tenacity would be a guy that you'd look at. So let's put that in as like a money is no object kind of a scenario. You could have something like this, but I think it's low likelihood because that's going to cost you a fair amount on those two buyouts. But I think if I'm Aphromoo and I see they're buying Tenacity and Luger, yeah, I'd be interested in this, especially given that I think I'm only going to have like bottom 5 team options. I would sign with that. I have no idea if Aphromoo would agree with me. You have to ask him yourself, but I think this is a relatively low likelihood. And because of the money. But FlyQuest might have money like they did, as far as I know, they spent fairly well. Excuse me, last year. But let's say you can't get Tenacity. Let's say there's a scenario we go for Jenkins, and that you have Jenkins, NXI, Palafox, I don't know, like Johnson and Aphromoo, and the only player you're bringing is Jenkins. My gut reaction if I saw this would be a little disappointed. Like I'd be, oh, Aphromoo, that's good, I like that. But I would have to be pretty inspired by what they're doing in Academy. And they'd have to give a lot of messaging to the fans like, hey, we think this roster could work out pretty well. And in 2023, we're going to like get a blue chip top and mid laner. But you can't say that with your current starters, right? But like there'd have to be some like future oriented messaging around this. But I think it's something they could end up doing. Now, what if they... What if they went for Jizuke on top of this? All right, like what if they did... Since Jizuke is going to be a free agent and I don't expect EG to retain him. And then what if they imported a bot laner as well? Who could they realistically get, right? I don't think it's realistic they could get Docdam. Maybe somebody like Crown Shot. Maybe somebody like Patrick. Could they? Which one? What do you guys think? Between Crown Shot and Patrick, or one of the other options here, who would be the most likely for them to target? Or like, not necessarily target, but who would they be most reasonably able to actually pull in? The Hoyadon, I think EG wants to move on from Jizuke. If like, I think if I was them, I would be, and watch the EG video once it's posted later, and you can see all my reasoning on that. I go into it a fair amount. Patrick or comp or crown shot or neon, all the different conversations. Yeah, and arrow is worth shutting out as an option here as well. So actually, let's put in. Let's make this a scenario. I don't know. What do you do in top lane if you do this? I don't want to like, okay, I'm not going to type out like all of the different iterations and combinations of scenarios. I don't really want to do that. I want to say, here's an example. I personally feel locked into NXI as the option for a player that I think could be good enough by 2023 to get us to Worlds. I'm pretty committed to that. So my scenarios are going to have NXI in them. But there is a chance that they would decide differently on this. I don't think they should, but they could. This is tough. So like what's another example of, so like here's a big buyout scenario, right? Like this is the big buyout scenario. I'll give it a label here. This is the big import scenario. Let's do a big import scenario, and then like a long-term goals scenario. Let's do those 3 scenarios, okay? So the big import scenario would be so let's say they import somebody like Patrick, and let's say they imported, ooh, here's an idea. We'll talk about this in a second. Let's say they import mid, but who would it be? Well, let's say they go Chizuke as our example here. And then they need a domestic top, right? So, Svenskeren is not a free agent, but I expect he'll be available from EG as a buyout. And if you want my deeper thoughts on that, watch the EG session. So here's a question. So if we look at free agents for top lane, the domestic top lane free agent pool is very narrow. But what if we speculate on who might be available for a buyout? Because if we are spending big enough to sign Jizuke, which I don't think Jizuke would be super expensive. We're spending big enough to sign, I don't know, Jizuke, Aframu, and then like an EU import. Yeah, these are going to be up on YouTube after. Then you might also be able to spend on buying out an NA top laner. Now, tenacity is one if you're going more long-term, right? But if you've got NXI, yeah, you might still want to have one more piece. But again, depending what you do in Academy, you might feel like you don't need a ton of youth in your LCS roster. Who are some potential players that might become available as buyouts? Someday? I mean, what if 100 Thieves want to promote tenacity and move on from Someday? I think that's pretty reasonable. Would you target Someday as a buyout? I think it wouldn't be that expensive. Domestic top laner. Because he's got his green card. Not going to get Fudge. Darshan, I think, doesn't fit your goals for what else we're doing in these pieces. I mean, Fake God. I don't think he's quite what we're looking for here. You're not going to get impact. I don't think you want anything there. You're not going to be going for Alfari. So here's the question. Would Huni become available for a buyout? And I think when you look at the situation with TSM and their results this year and the scope of changes, and I haven't done a session on TSM yet, but I will. I think Huni could be available. So Who would you rather have? Let's run this past you guys. If you're FlyQuest, and if the buyout numbers were the same, which of these top laners would you rather buy out? I'm curious what you guys think. What do you think? So my context on Huni, if you remember back to a year ago, everybody was saying Huni doesn't deserve to be in the league anymore. What's he doing? He was inting everything away. Blah blah blah. He's so terrible. I did like a full, a bunch of VOD review on him and tried to convince everybody, no, Huni is still a pretty decent player. You know, he's a mid-range LCS top laner, maybe upper half. And a lot of people thought I was just, pulling that out of nowhere and that Huni was totally washed up. And then TSM1 got Huni, and a lot of the TSM fans were really upset about it. And I think that Huni acquitted himself fairly well this year. Obviously, they didn't go to Worlds. I don't think that's on Huni or his performance. Obviously, if he was better, maybe they could have gone. But I don't think he's who you look at and say, man, if only we had somebody other than Huni. So I feel pretty good about it. And I think he is in a position where they can get value from him if they decide to sell him and go somewhere else. But I'm curious whether you guys think that that Someday would be a better option than Huni, whether Huni would be a better option than Someday. Both players who are domesticated into NA now, who I expect would be on the relatively low end of a buyout in terms of asking price, like, I don't know, 200, 250,000, something like that. So, curious what you think. But let's say, or I'll put it in that it's one of these two until we see. And I'll name whichever one you guys pulled for in the scenario. And we'll see how it goes. Let's do a quick Twitter scroll while we're waiting on the results. What do we got? We got a little time here. Woo. There's a pretty clear favorite so far. On the Someday side of this, Someday is the player that, like 5 or 6 years ago, I told my wife, hey, I need you to have a favorite player because I can't have too many favorite players. It's not fair. So you need to carry some of the favorite players for me. So Someday is now your favorite player, I told her, because I already had other players. I believe at that point Score was my favorite player, and I had a few others. And I think she still remembers that Someday is her favorite player because I told her he was. Overdrive asks, do I think Huni and Someday are less expensive buyouts than Academy players, and if so, why? Yes, I do. And it's because the Academy players, you're buying their potential, and you're buying, it's so hard to find young players with high potential, especially domestically, that you can build around for the next 3 or more years. Someday and Huni are players that you bring in because you think they can push you over the edge right now. And it's a little easier to find that player. You know what you're getting. And they're more likely to become free agents and pick them up other ways. So, partly due to a 4,600 channel point contribution from Wylarens, Someday has won the vote by quite a margin. But I think people could still look at this and say Huni or Someday in this scenario. But let's say Someday. So if FlyQuest ended up with a roster, an LCS roster of Someday, NXI, Jizuke, an import bot laner like Patrick, and Aframu, I'd feel pretty good about that, and I think it's not that unreasonable. Would this roster work? I mean, so yeah, Aframu and Someday have been on a team before. It didn't work out that well. I don't know if that has anything to do with, the interaction between the two of them, or if it was other things, but I don't think it really would tell you what's going on there. I think if you were doing this and you had Jizuke in your mid lane, then you want kind of a nice insurance policy from your bottom lane. I think you can get that from some of the available import bot laners. I kind of like this, but like let's look at something that is a little more long-term oriented. And I also want to talk a little bit about what they might do in Academy, but I don't really have a clear idea beyond Philip. I think you would keep Tomo probably because maybe you don't land your import and you'd be okay with... Well, here, we'll make Tomo part of the long-term goals scenario as well. So what do we do in our long-term goals scenario? So you want to get... I think Palafox then stays because as a long-term goal, again, you're giving him a year to see if he can take that next step and become somebody who can get you to Worlds in 2023. And if not, then you go big on an import replacement. But what do you do in top and support if you're doing this kind of like, we're doubling down on the development process thing here? I mean, is Philip 17 yet? I don't actually know. I don't think you can go Philip for the LCS though, even if he is 17. I think you need to give him that full year in Academy, so I'm not gonna go there. You think Philip is 18? I don't think so, but I could be wrong. I mean, you could hold on to Diamond. I mean, you could just go like, let's work with the pieces we already have. And like, what could you go for? Like, very youth-oriented top lane. Do you have enough experience? I think you have enough experience now in these pieces that you don't need to bring in another veteran alongside them. But I don't know. I wonder if I should do a scenario where they don't keep NXI. Philip is 19, people are saying in chat, so okay, but even so. Yeah, there isn't really a great, like, other than buying tenacity or like going deeper down the talent pool for someone like I mean, trying to get Tony Top out of EG. I mean, and maybe you do, wrong tab. But I think that's reaching quite a bit for an LCS player. Yeah, like I think you're speculating pretty hard and taking a big gamble if you try to bring Tony Top into LCS for next year. I don't think it's like completely ridiculous, but I think Tony Top is at the point where he still needs to earn his way up from Academy. So I'm not going to do that there. But like, who might you be able to get in top lane? I don't think amateur top laners like Faisal is interesting, Surdy is kind of interesting, but they're not like LCS interesting, definitely. I don't think you really have anything down here that I get hyped about. I'm just trying to see if like there's somebody I'm totally overlooking that I should be considering here for like a young prospect, kind of a top laner. And I'm not generally just personally a big fan of importing young talent. Because that means you're locking yourself into an import slot for the future. I think you should be trying to develop your talent domestically and importing. I think you should be using your import slots on your push me over the top kind of stuff where it's more of a sure thing what you're getting. Imports are a different type of a gamble in a sense, but I think you should import veterans, not rookies. That is my take. Yeah, I don't know. Like, that's actually part of what makes Philip so interesting, is that I think he looks like a guy who, with the right coaching and development in another year of Academy, could become an like a LCS level prospect. But I just can't convince myself that he's worth bringing into LCS for next year. So I don't know, man. I don't really see a great scenario where you go full long term. I think that's what your academy is for. Now, something you could do with your academy slot here to give NXI some insurance and back him up is you could consider buying Svenskeren. Would a Svenskeren NXI pairing be stronger than an NXI Jose Dioto pairing? Yeah, I think so. Or what if... So Will is a free agent, but he's not going to be available. I mean, Santorin, if you're going there, but I think it's more likely that you'd be able to get sign Svenskeren and then have him backing up in academy compared to Santorin. But yeah, I do think it would, like, I wonder if Svenskeren's at the point where if his only options are academy options, he would just retire. I don't really know. I'm kind of stuck here. I think FlyQuest are in a pretty difficult position. I don't think they're in a spot as difficult as CLG. Although in some ways it's more complicated because I think they have more assets to work with than CLG. So it's not like quite as much of a blank slate scenario that you're moving from. So you want to figure out how do we honor the relationships and contracts we currently have and stuff like that. Man. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to move things a whole lot more forward in the FlyQuest conversation beyond what we've already done. I think here, let's say that they, just for academy, just to have not question marks in here, let's say they bring in someone like Daption, who looks like a kind of a top tier amateur support prospect. And then what would they do in mid for the same thing, like Bradley or Doxa or Dark Wings or someone like that? Like let's say their academy looks something like that. And just for due diligence, like, is there somebody from jungle that I think could be more prospecty? I don't think leaving NXI another year in academy is going to benefit him or you. That's something I feel as well. So I think like the time to promote NXI is now. Yeah, I don't know. I don't want to just sit here staring into space and thinking forever, so there might be one more LCS scenario I could look at, but I think either you're spending big on some buyouts or you're finding a big import to round out. I think, like, okay, I shouldn't be only doing scenarios where Afroma comes in as a support. Let's say the big buyout scenario is actually something like Luger and Isles. And that the import scenario is more like something like this. Let's just put, I think it looks goofy this way, so we're going to do Patrick like that. Let's say it would look something like that. Now what would be, is there one more scenario? I know there's a lot of conversation going on about my comments about importing players who are young. When to be a little more clear on that, I'm saying like importing like rookies, right? Sure, Power of Evil, Huni, players like that were young when they were imported, but they were also relatively proven commodities at that time. They had pro experience, at least a full year of pro experience. So I'm talking about rookies. I'm talking about import. I don't think you should import rookies. So like, when we're talking about Takeover at TSM, for example, like, great, you've got Takeover, and let's say he played the whole split as well as he did in like the first 3 weeks of summer. Let's say he did that. Now you're in a position where, okay, are you going to promote Takeover and use an import slot on that, or are you going to spend big money and try to import like Chovy or whatever? Which would you rather have? If you're going to be using an import slot, do you really want to take that risk? I mean, it can work out, right? It worked out with Broken Blade, let's say. He also had kind of pro experience at TCL level. Yeah, Fudge is not an example of this because he had the full OCE split and had gone to Worlds. Plus, he, luckily for C9, got converted to a domestic player. So, man, like, obviously there are exceptions to every rule. But conceptually, as an overall philosophy, if I'm going to be bringing a rookie into my LCS team, or even more so into Academy, and hoping that they work out and grow and become like a piece that helps me get to Worlds, I'm going to do everything I can to make that a domestic player first, and to use my import slots for players where I have a much higher understanding of what I'm getting from them. That's going to push me over the edge and get me to Worlds. So yeah, I'm still trying to think if I can come up with one more scenario for FlyQuest that looks very different from these ones. But like, and obviously you could get some really very different stuff, right? Like what if they signed Self-Made and like, let's just type out a thing like this, right? What if they went like something with Self-Made? What if they had a big import, I don't know, Jizuke or whatever else, right? Maybe they would keep Kumo in this. This is not what I would do. I'm just like penciling in some stuff. And then they went with like, maybe they thought, oh, sure, Johnson, Jammer or whatever. This is not something I would do. Because this would be the scenario of we're going to get the two best, like we're going to get two really good imports and hope they carry us. You know, hope that they carry the rest of our team. I don't like having I don't like having imports that have a gap that big from my domestic players. Because my approach, and I've said this lots of other places, I think League of Legends roster construction is very much about the weakest link, not the strongest link. And it, you know, I have to be careful the way I bring this across because I don't want to be going around calling players weak links. I think, you know, I don't like to rag on people like that, but yeah, I don't like to put my team in a position where I'm spending the vast majority of my resources on getting the two strongest imports I can, unless I built up a domestic core strong enough to justify it. And I don't think this domestic core would be strong enough to justify a self-made level acquisition. So I want to make sure I leveled up my domestic core as well. That's why I don't really like a scenario like this one. So I would want to make sure, like in the scenario above, that I also got like a someday and an Aphromoo or something. But like, let's say, let's say they did something like that, and maybe you also get someday in this one. Well, we'll do Huni in this one because we had the vote between the two of them, right? So if it was like Huni and you brought in Self-Made and you signed Jizuke or another import, would you feel okay about this? I'd feel a little more okay about this. And I think this could happen. Something like this could happen. In terms of other options for support here, I mean, the Afremu option is just as valid here as anywhere else. I'm just wanting to have some different types of scenarios, right? Let's say something like that. I think I've dwelt on the FlyQuest options quite a bit. And as rumors start to fly later in the offseason, maybe things will shift up a little bit. But this is kind of how I would see some options, some scenarios working out for them. But like I don't think I have a huge level of confidence in predicting any of this. Something about it feels like they're going to go different direction on this. So we'll leave it at that. That's going to be my FlyQuest kind of thoughts that you had to piece all the way through. I think we spent a long time on this one. And we'll move on to the next team. So curious what other people think, what you'd comment about it, which parts of this you think are most or less realistic, or at least what players maybe should have been considered in this that weren't. Yeah, I'm not really sure. I'll be very curious to see what Nick Fan and FlyQuest pull off.